Hi, you guys. Thank you for tuning in today again on this Friday. Our show, Poetic Justice, hosted by the NAACP Chicago Westside branch. I'm your host, Jamesia Banks.
And I'm Tara Levy.
Yes. And today we will just be talking about how Illinois it's only one signature away from joining 10 other states that have legalized the recreational use of marijuana. And this came in with bipartisan vote of 66 to 47 of the House approved a bill last Friday, and it has been passed by the Senate on Wednesday. And our Governor J.B. Pritzker, we are just waiting for his signature. Remember, he ran his campaign off of the legalization of recreational use of marijuana. So this will be the 11th state to approve for recreational use, and if it is approved, we will be the first state to have been voted in by legislature and not through a ballot vote. So some of the terms of our legislation would be, it will allow residents of Illinois aged 21 years and older to legally possess 30 grams of cannabis, 5 grams of cannabis concentrate, or 500 milligrams of THC contained in a cannabis-infused product. So those are just edibles. Non-residents could possess 15 grams of cannabis. It will also create a licensed cultivation and dispensary system while directing Pritzker to pardon people with past convictions for low-level pot possession. And we do want to notice that they are giving second chance to thousands of people, but that does not mean everyone. So these are just thousands of people and not all of the lives that have been taken away and put in jail for nonviolent drug crimes. This bill would allow employers to maintain a zero tolerance policy for cannabis in the workplace and create a task force through the Illinois State Police to examine ways to enforce DUI laws involving marijuana use. So jobs can still test you for marijuana, and the police can still enforce the DUI if you're driving. Local governments will have wide-ranging control over zoning for marijuana-related businesses, including the ability to prohibit them. So if you still live in a certain part of Illinois, they can still prohibit you from having a marijuana-related business. The bill would create a social equity program to help minority business owners enter the marijuana industry, including through grants and loans. It also establishes a grant to help pay for programs in communities disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. After paying for regulatory expenses and costs related to expungement processes, marijuana revenue will be divided among a number of areas. The largest share, 35%, will go into the state's general fund, 25% will go into the community grants, 20% to mental health and substance abuse programs, 10% to pay back the state's backlog of unpaid bills, 8% to support law enforcement, and just 2% for our public education. So, with those facts, that is really saying, like, you can have weed, but we just want you to have it because we can tax on it, but we're still going to make sure that, you can still go to jail, you can still lose your job. We're not using this much money to fund public education, but we are definitely using much more money to help with law enforcement. So if we have more law enforcement to help enforce more policies for cannabis, that's a statement in its own right there.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all this revenue can be generated just by legalizing the use of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And then, what stuck out to me was that only some thousands of people will get their lives back, right? So, if they were previously incarcerated for selling weed, what is it, a handful of people? Mm-hmm. How is that?
Who are they choosing?
Who are they choosing?
Exactly.
And,
how do they choose?
Is it based on people you know? Is it based on a statistic? What does that mean? What would that look like? And, these rules are to come into play 2020, which is right around the corner if this is passed. So there could be a lot of breaking barriers, I see. Definitely. Next year.
Definitely. And while we are talking about the legalization of it, I just want to remind everybody about the war on drugs. Yes, and how it was a failed fight, the war on drugs, and how we can have spent so much more money, so much more effort on actually rehabbing people or actually trying to help people out instead of just putting people in jail and putting people in unfortunate circumstances. So, as a part of the War on Drugs initiative, we have one of the presidents, Richard Nixon, and he increased federal funding for drug control agencies and proposed strict measures such as mandatory prison sentencing for drug crimes. So even if you are a non-violent drug offender, you had a mandatory sentence. You had to go to jail, and most times the sentences were longer for black people. So Nixon went to create the Drug Enforcement Administration, which is the DEA, and that was in 1973. And this agency is responsible for tackling drug use and smuggling in the United States. And at the start, the DEA was given 1,400 special agents and budget of less than $75 million. And today, the agency has nearly 5,000 agents and a budget of $2.03 billion. Billion. Yes. So, we just want to bring up his efforts. During an interview, 1994 interview, President Nixon's domestic policy chief, his name was John Ehrlichman, he provided inside information suggesting that the War on Drugs campaign had ulterior motives, which mainly involved helping Nixon keep his job as president. So Nixon temporarily placed marijuana in a Schedule I, the most restrictive category of drugs, and that was pending review by the commission he appointed, led by the Republican Pennsylvania governor Raymond Shepard in 1972. And that commission unanimously recommended decriminalizing the possession and distribution of marijuana for personal use. And Nixon simply ignored that and went on and continued his war on drugs.
In the interview conducted by journalist Dan Barr and published in Harper Magazine, Ehrlichman explained that the Nixon campaign had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. His comments led many to question Nixon's intentions in advocating for drug reform and whether racism played a role. Ehrlichman was quoted as saying, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war on black, but by getting the public to associate with the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did."
Yes. So,
Yeah.
that was just the beginning. We're not even getting to the rest of the presidents. And this is not the beginning, but this is, let's just say, more recent. That's how we want to start it. So Richard Nixon definitely did not really care about helping people that were on drugs, people that were addicted to drugs. He just wanted to have ulterior motives to put black people in jail.
Pretty much. And that made me think about a scene on Boys in the Hood when Lawrence Fishburne, he was the father, talking to his son. He was like, "How many brothers you know own private jets that can fly out and get these drugs? How many brothers you know who can do that? How many brothers you know who got ships that can sell out and get these drugs abroad? How many brothers you know who can do that?" So it's not us that's infiltrating the drugs in the community.
Exactly.
There are people outside that are coming into the community to have these drugs here, and then we make profit from it. From this profit, we're arrested. So again, this is all by design.
Yes.
And the fact that black people were making profits, were making a living for themselves and providing for their family in non-traditional ways, that's when it became an issue. That's like, you know what? Let's vilify them. Let's find a way to terrorize their community even more so that they cannot provide for themselves. That we're going to continue to break down the family structure by having the fathers and the men and the boys incarcerated, right? So just constantly thinking you're taking 2 steps forward, but you keep going 2 steps back because there's always something against you.
Definitely. Then we had...
And we have a caller. Hello.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes.
Can you turn it up a little louder?
Not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay, yeah, I'm with the NAACP on the south side. So I wanted to make 2 points. I think it's important for us to look at what some of the other states are doing in terms of social justice. I'd like both of you sisters to look up 2 laws. One is in New Jersey. It's called NJ, that's for New Jersey. S is in Sam, 3307. Now that law allows most individuals to get at least 3 felony convictions erased off their records after 6 years. So that's something which goes way beyond just expunging or erasing a marijuana conviction. That could be theft, that could be cocaine, that could be crystal meth. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It runs the gamut. So it goes way beyond just concentrating and centering on marijuana. The other one is the West Virginia Second Chance Act. And the West Virginia Second Chance Act allows you to get a felony knocked down to a misdemeanor after X amount of years. Now, all of this is given that you don't do anything, within that time frame of six years or 10 years, which I think is the case with West Virginia, after that conviction. So I just think it's important for groups like the NAACP for us to look at what other states are doing, to coordinate, and to say, not just look at Illinois as like a little bubble, as if, the only choices we have are what people in Illinois are talking about.
Definitely. And thank you for calling in
Yes,
and making
thanks
us
for chiming
aware
in.
and making our viewers aware of that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please Google those 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. How cool would that be if we follow that legislation? Like, how would the hood benefit from this? Like, can you imagine, like, having people who were formerly incarcerated due to petty thefts, like selling marijuana, and then, like, getting their time back, as well as, like, getting that expunged from their record?
It would it would be kind of like an equity situation in life, right? Because this is life that has been taken from people very unfairly. Marijuana is a plant grown by the earth, and locking someone up over that is something so natural, you are robbing people of their lives. So I think it would be an equity game at that point.
Yeah. And I know last Saturday, Congressman Danny K. Davis, he held a trip. So for those who had loved ones and fathers and brothers, sons, pretty much anyone who was incarcerated and who couldn't celebrate Father's Day weekend with their family, he sent a couple of busloads of people out to visit them. And when I saw the people who went to visit their loved ones, they looked so young. A lot of them had young children. It just made me think, like, what are they locked up for? And could it be something like selling marijuana that's got them separated from their families? Just makes you wonder.
Makes you wonder, why do they do this? Mm-hmm. Yes, because we had another president that turned up the war on drugs, if we want to say that. And his name was Ronald Reagan. So on October 14th, 1982, Ronald Reagan declared a war on drugs, doubling down on an initiative that was started by Richard Nixon. And Reagan declared that illicit drugs were a direct threat to the United States national security. And through a series of legislation, like the mandatory minimum sentencing laws of 1986, it made a hard right turn away from the public health approach use. So, like I said, they weren't trying to make sure people were healthy or we had rehabilitation centers. They just wanted to make sure there was enough people in jail because, a lot of jails are privatized and you make money off of these bodies inside of jail. And the easiest way to do that is to convince people it's a war on drugs. Even though studies show at the time there was a decline in the use of drugs at the time. But he had to keep his job and he wanted to enforce the stuff that Richard Nixon did, so he had to make it seem like it was a bigger deal. Drug offenders face lifetime consequences for minor infractions, yet the focus on tough sentences for crack and not powder cocaine meant that people were going to prison were largely black people. So they made a difference between crack and cocaine, even though these were the same drug, but the black people used crack and white people used cocaine. So they made it a difference in category, and you get such a harsher sentence, harsher punishment if you were falling under the crack category. So the media seems to play along. So that's why it's very important about representation and what we see, because if that's what we're always seeing on TV, that's what you believe. It was hyping up threats with racist coverage that largely ignored rampant cocaine use amongst whites and sensationalized the crack problem in inner city black neighborhoods.
Okay, so spoiler alert. I'm a big fan of The Chi. Have you seen the latest episode of The Chi?
I have not, but you can spoil it for me.
Sorry. Okay, so this is what happened. Jake, y'all know Jake, he's Reg's little brother. They actually are both Chicago natives. I met Reg one time. He's from the West Side. And I believe Jake is also, I think he may be a South Side native. Anywho, they both are Chicago actors featured on The Chi. For those who don't know The Chi, Reg is a drug dealer on the show. He's like probably in his 20s, and he's raising his brother by himself. His brother's like a preteen. So anyway, Jake, Reg's little brother, is really trying to find himself, but he looks up to his brother, Reg, a lot because he doesn't have his mom or dad around. Not a whole lot of positive influences in his life, but he knows that Reg, the drug dealer, is making it. So he wants to be like Reg. So he too is a drug dealer. But guess who Jake is selling his drugs to? It's not to his black counterparts at school, but to the white kids on the north side. So it makes you think, like, what is the image of a drug user? And why are they not being criminalized? If the image really is, now we know that black and brown people also have drugs in their community, but we know that it's not just us. So why is it that we are the targeted audience of witnessing it and being received as all this backlash, but at the same time, there are other communities, there are other people who use these drugs as well. So it made you think about it. It made you say, like, you know what? Jake is this kid who's selling drugs not to his own classmates, but to white kids up north. Right. And again, this show is based on Chicago. So this is not just something that's just far off. This is something that's actually real life. You know, that there probably are 12-year-old drug dealers out there. Sad but true. And who's to say that everybody in their community is who they're selling it to?
Exactly. And I also did want to point out that Ronald Reagan's wife was she'd be held accountable for this as well. She helped orchestrate the Just Say No program, which was a huge flop when it came to helping kids cope with complex situations, because really it was just a quote. She had nothing to back it up. There were no programs to help kids that were already on drugs. She had no programs to help prevent. She did come out with the DARE program.
Yep.
I was in DARE. A lot of people that were in DARE. A lot of people seen DARE, but was it really a great contribution? I don't think it really had that many effects on.
We saw a lot of DARE t-shirts.
Yeah, we saw a lot of DARE t-shirts. And we heard the Just Say No a million times. But when it comes to statistics, Just Say No really didn't do anything but help make people think that people were crazy and people were really on drugs and people were like black and they needed to be in jail. That was layman's terms. That's the best I could say it. So meanwhile, during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, the U.S. government put money and military resources behind Central American groups known to be trafficking cocaine, drugs, and guns into the inner streets of America. So just like you were saying, how are the guns, how is the weed, how is the crack, how is the cocaine getting to America? If black people weren't traveling like that, it was so hard. It's so hard for us to obtain passports. It's so hard for us to obtain plane tickets. It's so hard for us to even walk through the airport and not be searched. So how are we getting this?
We can't walk in our own neighborhoods without being searched.
Exactly. So how did it get there? Right. The presidents were allowing foreigners to come in and bring these problems to America so they could have someone to blame it on. And he was ignoring this. He never used any CIA agents, any of his backup to stop the people from coming in and flooding the streets with guns, weed, and crack. But he definitely helped hype up in the media that black people were using the crack that came from nowhere. The sun dropped it down. So
Yeah.
that was that.
Yeah. Again, feel free to chime in. Call us now at 312-738-1060. We're interested to see, like, what's your position on this? Should there be legislation for medical use, recreational use in Illinois in 2020?
Definitely.
We'll see. And how would that affect us as a community? Like, what benefits or draws would you see that happening if this legislation is passed come 2020?
Because long ago, racist ideas distorted drug policies in America. And the media frenzy around the crack epidemic created hysteria that meant support for his law and order policy approach to drug use. And prison populations soared as blacks were targeted by law enforcement, despite using drugs similar rates to whites. So, under President Reagan's campaign, he attracted voters through racially coded appeals that allowed them to avoid admitting that they were attracted by the racist appeals. He stood at the head of a reactionary movement that undid some of the material gains of the civil rights and black power activists. He did not stop the CIA-backed Contra rebels of Nicaragua from smuggling cocaine into the country to fund their operation. And the number of people behind bars for nonviolent drug law offenses increased from 50,000 in 1980 to over 400,000 by 1987.
For just 17 years. It's like more than quadruple the population. That's radical.
Exactly. So that's just saying.
And that was 20 years ago.
Sweeping people, exactly.
So what is it now?
Because they're just gathering people off the street for little amounts of weed. Imagine if you just had like a little blunt and you spend the next 40 years of your life in jail.
Yep. The drug war has produced profoundly unequal outcomes across racial groups, manifested through racial discrimination by law enforcement and disappropriate drug war misery suffered by communities of color. Nearly 80% of people in federal prison and almost 60% of people in state prison for drug offenses are black and Latino. Research shows that prosecutors are twice as likely to pursue a mandatory minimum sentence for black people as for white people charged with the same offense. Among people who received a mandatory minimum sentence in 2011, 38% were Latino and 31% were black. Black people and Native Americans are more likely to be killed by law enforcement than any other racial or ethnic groups. They are often stereotyped as being violent or addicted to alcohol and other drugs. Experts believe that the stigma and racism may play a major role in police-community interactions. So again, we see how whatever it is, the odds are always against us. But what can we do to not say erase everything? There's always going to be some racial factor there. But what can we do to fight back? And I think voting on legislation that can benefit our communities is the first step.
Definitely. Because these long-term effects are exactly that. These are long-term effects from the war on drugs, and they're still affecting us today. Just like you said, we have been stereotyped. People would see a black person, oh, they must be a crackhead, they're on welfare, they have a father at home, or this and that. Oh, they deserve to be in jail because it's one less thug on the street, you know? So I agree. Voting on it and also just opening your mind and listening and really starting to wonder, how are the drugs getting into the states? How are the drugs getting to the drug dealers? If we can, as a people, can think along those same lines and understand that right there, then that will help with the stereotype of black people creating drugs and trying to make America worse than what it is. Because really, we are just we have made it great.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we mentioned, this has been a historical issue. So if we don't do anything, just let it be, it's not going to get any better. Because we cannot always depend on our government to fix our problems for us. But if we as a people see opportunities to make a change, we should go for it.
Definitely. Now, I do want to talk about the benefits in Illinois, so just so that we do see what may be going on for us. So marijuana tax collections in Colorado and Washington have exceeded its initial estimates. So all of the stuff that we're about to discuss, like, these are just estimates. These are not, anything can be exceeded. So a mature marijuana industry could generate up to $28 billion in tax revenues for federal, state, and local governments, including $7 billion in federal revenue, $5.5 billion from business taxes, and $1.5 billion from income and payroll taxes.
A federal tax of $23 per pound of product, similar to the federal tax on tobacco, could generate $500 million per year. Alternatively, a 10% sales surf tax could generate $5.3 billion per year, with higher tax rates collecting proportionally more. The reduction of societal risk in being engaged in the marijuana trade, as well as the inclusion of taxes, will combine to reduce profits and tax collections somewhat from an initial level after national legalization. Society pays all the costs regardless of legality, but tax revenues help offset those costs. The U.S. cannabis industry is also generating new jobs. So that's more money for us. There have already been 80,000 new jobs created in California because of cannabis sales. Y'all, I had a college roommate freshman year. She stayed 1 year at the University of Missouri and she never came back. Why is that, you ask? Her and her boyfriend, I'm not sure how stable this is, but her and her boyfriend at 18 years old, they left college, they dropped out to start a weed farm in California. I have not seen her since our freshman year of college. I don't know how well she's doing. But the fact that she was just so gun-ho on starting a whole new life of selling weed is like, tells me she actually believed in the economy of marijuana.
Definitely.
So I wish her all the best. I'm not saying that just have that as like your only plan in life to be a weed salesman. That may work for you, no judgment. But the fact that she left college to start a weed farm shows that there are some benefits in having that in our economy.
Definitely. It's a money-making business, you know. It sells itself. You don't have to put much into it, you know. So that was a pretty great entrepreneurship to me, you know.
See, wish you all the luck, girl.
Right? Yes. But those are just our thoughts, our very few thoughts on the legalization of marijuana here in Illinois. And we shall continue this conversation. But until then, let's wrap up and tell you about our announcements. So, we will have a board and community stakeholders
Westside State of Emergency meeting tomorrow, June 8th at 2:30 p.m. at the Westside. So Westside State of Emergency at community meeting at the West Austin Child Development Center, 4920 West Madison, Chicago.
Yes, perfect. Excuse me. But I just want to thank you guys so much for tuning in again on this lovely Friday evening.
Yes.
My name is Jamesia Banks.
And I am Tara Levy. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, with the Chicago NAACP. And we will be here next week. Well, our next meeting is not next month.
But Saturday, August 3rd, we will have our nationals next month. But you're welcome to join us back again in August. See you then.
See you then.